Can we start with Heathrow? It must be embarrassing, Chancellor, to have our biggest airport knocked out by a fire in a single substation and then not to have the capacity to divert flights to, let's say, Gatwick. Are you regretting the decision to put the final decision on a second runway at Gatwick off for 6 months?
We've given an in principle decision to expand Gatwick as well as supporting expansion of a third runway at Heathrow. I think what's happened over the last couple of days...
put it off for 6 months.
Well, it's the first time that we've had an in-principle decision to expand Gatwick. That's been welcomed by Gatwick Airport and by the operators. We do need to expand airport capacity in the UK, and I think that what we've seen in the last couple of days shows how important that is, but also how important it is to build the resilience in our UK critical infrastructure, including our hub airport, Heathrow.
Well, I suppose the reason that I ask you that is that putting off the Gatwick decision by 6 months feels like another British way of doing infrastructure. We're going to promise it, but we're going to put it off again and again. What happened this weekend feels like another example putting off infrastructure, and then we pay the price, as we did on Friday and Saturday.
We've given an in-principle decision to expand Gatwick. That has never happened before, although it's something that the airport has been asking for a long time. So we're not kicking this into the long grass. There's some work to be done to make sure that it can be done without all the judicial reviews that so often hold up infrastructure in the UK. And we've also made a commitment to have spades in the ground in this Parliament at Heathrow when we build a third runway there. So this government are getting on with the job, building the infrastructure, whether that is the digital infrastructure, the transport infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, or indeed the 1.5 million homes that this country needs. Okay. We're backing the builders, not the blockers.
OK. Well, I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to discuss that, but let's get on with what you're going to do this week, which is a spring statement. The Office of Budget Responsibility is going to slash its growth forecast, we hear. Some say by as much as a half. You have no fiscal headroom left. Just how serious is the country's financial situation?
I'm not going to preempt the Office of Budget Responsibility's forecast, but the world has changed. We can all see that before our eyes. And government are not inactive in that. We'll respond to the change and continue to meet our fiscal rules, but we're also shaping the new world, whether that's in the defence and security realm or indeed on the economy. I promised at the general election to bring stability back to the economy. As a result of that stability, interest rates have been cut 3 times since the general election. That's a far cry from the 11% inflation and the interest rate hikes that we saw under the previous government, and that's only been possible because we've put our public finances on a firm footing, and we've also put our public services on a firm footing, which is what I did in the budget last year.
This is a rather cheerful reading of the situation. Actually, inflation was on its way down when you came in. It's actually slightly ticking back up. But the point I really wanted to ask you about is to describe how serious you think it is. The Joseph Rowntree Trust Foundation today predicts a huge fall in living standards by the end of this Parliament.
I reject that.
You think they're just wrong?
I reject that. And the Office of Budget Responsibility will set out their forecast this week. Living standards in the last Parliament were the worst ever on record. The Office of Budget Responsibility forecast... the Office of Budget Responsibility forecast in October that living standards would increase at double the rate in this Parliament as they did in the last Parliament. They'll set out their updated numbers this week. But if you look at wages at the moment, wages are rising today at twice the rate of inflation. That is very different from what we saw under the previous government.
But just to be clear, you're saying that you simply don't think that living standards are going to fall. In fact, you're suggesting that they're rising now and they'll continue to rise. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm confident that we will see living standards increase during the course of this Parliament. What we've already seen in these last few months of the Labour government is a sustained increase in living standards. Next month, at the beginning of April, people on the national living wage will see a 6.7% increase in their wages, £1,400 more a year. That's only possible because of the stability that we have returned to the economy. And of course, those three cuts in interest rates from the Bank of England mean that mortgage rates are lower than they otherwise would have been. We've got to do more, absolutely, in terms of raising living standards. But this government have already got started in delivering our plan for change.
Well, look, there's that you can say the picture you've just painted, but there's a different way of seeing this. Inflation isn't coming down as fast as you hoped it was.
Well, again, the Office of Budget Responsibility will do their forecast.
Well, they'll do that. Well, I'm just never mind the forecast. Let's look at what's happened already. Inflation's not coming down at the rate you hoped it was. Interest rates are being held; they're not coming down. The growth figures are absolutely flat, and per capita growth is actually falling. Are you being a bit complacent about where we are now?
I know that we need to go further and faster in delivering economic growth and seeing public services improve. But there are no shortcuts here. It's the hard yards that are necessary.
But if you want people to do the hard yards, you have to convince them, surely, that the situation demands it. And what we're hearing this morning from you, I'm afraid, is one that says, actually, it's kind of OK, don't worry too much.
Things have changed since the general election. We've had cuts in interest rates, not hikes in interest rates, and wages are rising faster than inflation. That was not the case in the previous Parliament, which was the worst on record for living standards. But are you saying, do we need to do more to grow the economy, to address the cost of living crisis? Absolutely, we do. That is why we are reducing bureaucracy and regulation. It's why we are reforming the pension system to bring more money into the economy and so much more.
I want to come to what you're going to do, but I just want to get clear on what you think the problem you're solving is. Has the economy declined, got worse, more difficult since you came to office or not?
The economy is not growing fast enough. I'm not satisfied with the numbers that we see at the moment.
It's not growing at all. The last month was 0.1. OK, it's gone up and down a bit, but it's basically flat on its back.
And it's not possible within just a few months to reverse more than a decade of economic stagnation. But we are making the changes that's necessary to get Britain building again, to bring money into the economy. The International Investment Summit that we hosted last year brought more than £60 billion of investment into the United Kingdom. Our commitment at the budget to spend £100 billion more on infrastructure during this Parliament, the creation of a national wealth fund to leverage in private sector money into our economy. The OECD predicted just last week that our economy will be the second fastest G7 economy in terms of growth next year. Yes, we do need to do more. Growth is the number one mission of this government. We're turning things around, but it takes hard work and there are no shortcuts to get there.
Let's talk about how much of the situation we're in is you and how much is the past. You routinely blame the Tories for the situation you're in, but business leaders routinely say that it was your pessimistic messages in the autumn that discouraged spending, your national insurance rise that halted hiring and depressed the economy. Honestly, looking back at it now, did you overdo the doom and gloom?
When I became Chancellor, we did inherit a £22 billion black hole in the public finances.
Much
I had to
contested, but anyway.
Well, the OBR set out that in the numbers they published last year. We have addressed that. It did require difficult decisions, particularly in terms of tax.
But that's not what I'm asking about. The message you were giving, and the Prime Minister, through the autumn was, it's terrible, it's awful, we have to do all sorts of things. Did you overdo the pessimism?
No, we took the action that was necessary to ensure that our public services and public finances were on a firm footing. And the tax, the national insurance, the non-dom tax, the VAT on private schools, that money has been used to both secure the public finances and to put more than £20 billion into the National Health Service, which is why for 5 months in a row now we've seen NHS waiting lists decline. It's why from April we're beginning to roll out breakfast clubs, free breakfast clubs at every primary school to help working parents and give children the best start in life.
Interrupting you.
That's what we've been able to deliver.
But those national insurance rises haven't actually kicked in yet. They're about to kick in now. Is that going to depress the economy further?
Well, look, the Office of Budget Responsibility will set out their forecast. I recognise that there are costs. Because it's them who do the forecast.
Because you're the Chancellor, and you've mentioned the OBR, I think, now 5 times. Who's running this country? Is it you or the OBR?
I make the policy decisions, but it is right that forecasting is done by someone else. I shouldn't be marking my own homework, and I'm not going to be doing that. Unlike the previous government, I've got respect for those independent economic institutions. But, Trevor, your question is, do tax increases have an impact on the economy? Of course they do. But imagine if I'd have done something else last October. Imagine if I'd have swept the problems under the carpet and said everything was fine. Then today, when we face the aggression from Russia, we wouldn't have the additional money to spend on defence. We would be in a situation where NHS waiting lists will continue.
It's not additional money. You took it out of overseas aid. It's not additional money. You took it out of the international aid budget.
Yes, we made that decision, but if the public finances weren't on a firm footing, we'd have to be raiding budgets to prop up the public finances. Instead, we were able to redirect money from international development to defence spending, and the Bank of England have had the confidence to cut interest rates 3 times since the general election. That would not have been possible unless I had delivered a budget that brought stability back to the economy. And I'll make no apologies for doing that, because it's not the wealthy and the most privileged who lose out when the economy is unstable. It's ordinary working people and ordinary businesses who see the costs of borrowing go up, who see that uncertainty in the economy having a direct impact on their living standards. I have returned stability to the economy, and that was the right thing to do.
Let's talk about what you are actually going to do next. It's reported that you want to cut civil service costs by 10%. What is it that civil servants are doing now that we don't really need have done? And can you give an example of a task done by humans that's going to be done completely by AI?
Yeah, there's a number of briefing roles that can now be done by technology. Business use technology and AI much more than we do in the public sector. And it's one of the reasons why in the zero-based review that every department is doing at the moment.
But principally as an aid, not as a replacement for human capabilities?
Well, actually, a bit of both. I mean, for example, in departments like His Majesty's Revenue and Customs and DWP, we're rooting out fraud in part by using technology much better. That's a really good example of how we are using technology to deliver better public services at lower cost to the taxpayer. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, announced the abolition of NHS England, the biggest quango
he was
in the
here
world,
last week telling me about
employing
that.
more than 15,000 people. We can make efficiencies there. We can do the same work with less people if we reduce that duplication. We've already taken out 2 regulators because we don't think we need them.
Yeah, you took out 2 regulators, but you've invented another 27.
That is just not the case. We've taken out 2 regulators. That's been welcomed by business, and it would also reduce the cost of running the state. But NHS England, 15,000 people today, often duplicating the work that the Department of Health is doing. I want money spent on the front line, not on bureaucracy.
How many civil servants are you going to get rid of?
Well, what we've done is not a civil servant target, but an admin target. So that also targets consultancy spend, for example.
How many people are going to lose their jobs?
Well, it will be up for every department to set out those plans. But I would rather have people working on the front line in our schools and our hospitals and our police rather than in back office jobs. So this isn't just about...
No, but you have to be straight with people. How many civil servants are going to lose their jobs in broad terms? OK, I'm not asking you for, 532 or 5,027, but broadly speaking, is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 15,000?
We've said a 10 to 15%, 15% by the end of the Parliament, reduction in admin budgets. In admin budgets. So that includes consultancy, it includes travel budgets, it includes communications budgets. So it doesn't all have to be about people. But when we make those savings...
It's going to be about people. And when you can't say this is going to be pain-free.
No, but what I am saying is it will deliver better public services, because I would rather we had people employed by the NHS working in our hospitals rather than in a government department. So this is about doing things differently and putting money where people see it most.
Forgive me, Chancellor, this is what people say about politicians. I ask you a question that says, broadly speaking, how many roles are going to get lost? I cannot believe that you're telling your colleagues we need to take 10% out without any idea how many of those are going to be actual jobs. I just cannot believe that that's what you're doing.
I'm confident that we can reduce civil service numbers by 10,000. And during COVID, there were big increases in the number of people who were working in the civil service. That was the right thing to do to respond to those challenges. But it's not right that we just keep those numbers there forever, because they haven't been cut back since COVID, despite the fact that the world has changed since then. And I don't want money spent on bureaucracy and back office functions. I want those staff on the front line, teaching our kids, working in our hospitals, delivering those frontline public services.
Is it true that Chief Secretaries asked some departments to model budget cuts of over 5% and 11%?
We've asked departments to do a zero-based review, and so to rank all of their spending from the most vital to the least important. And it's through that exercise that we've made decisions to take out regulators. It's through that exercise that we've made decisions to get rid of NHS England, and we will continue to use that to make sure there hasn't been a zero-based review of government spending since 2007.
But I was asking about departmental budgets.
Yes, so we've asked every department to rank their spending from the most important to the least important.
So you haven't said, give us a picture of a 5% cut or 11% cut. You simply, the zero-based budgeting is a whole different exercise.
Well, we've asked them to rank every line of their expenditure from the most important, so you can see what the top 1%, the top 2%, and indeed the least important 1%, 5% and 20% of spending. And then we will ask departments, well, with a budget, would you rather spend more on your priorities, or would you rather continue the budgets as they are today? Because I think it is really important that we evaluate everything that we do, because in the end, this is the money of ordinary working people and ordinary businesses, and it hasn't been evaluated since 2007. I am absolutely convinced we can get better value for money for all of the taxes that are paid into the system.
But I'm not entirely clear. You're asking people to tell you, what their priorities are, but you haven't told me whether that's for the purpose of just saying, this is interesting, we might move the money around, or for the purpose of deciding where you're going to cut spending. Are there going to be spending cuts?
There will be real-term spending increases in every year of this Parliament. Real-term spending increases in every year of this Parliament. But as a government, we have to decide where that money is spent. And we want to spend it on our priorities. We've set out a plan for change at the election about reducing waiting.
What is not clear is, when you put forward the budget, you were talking about real terms increases, I think something above 1%, 1.3%, I believe it was. Is that what is going to be the case for the rest of the Parliament, or will the spending increases be lower than that 1.3%? I'm trying to work out what is actually going to happen.
We'll set out all of that in the spending review, including with the departmental allocations in June. But what I can tell you, Trevor, is that in every single year of this Parliament, there will be real terms increases in government spending. But of course, as a government, we will allocate the money to the areas where we think we can get most bang for the buck, where we can deliver on the priorities of the British people, which is improving living standards, reducing NHS waiting lists, making sure that every kid gets the best start in life.
We've had a pretty thorough discussion about this. On almost everything you said to me, it is, I can't tell you how many jobs go.
I just did, Trevor.
Yeah, eventually. You told me 10,000.
Well, because the target is not a civil servant number target.
But the point is, it sort of feels like what you want to do is to say, it's all going to be tough, but actually there's not really going to be too much pain for anybody. It just feels like you're not being entirely straight with us.
Well, if you work for NHS England, a lot of those jobs will go. Okay. But if you work on the front line in public services, we won't put more money in there. In the budget, because of the difficult decisions that I took on taxation, we were able to put more than £20 billion into the NHS. That's the priorities of this government, and those are the priorities of the British people, and we're delivering against them. Okay. But are we going to do everything the same? No, we are not. We are going to change how government works. We're going to rewire the state and put money into priorities, not just keep on doing what the previous government did.
Welfare, well, let's not go... Just no interview with a senior government minister can go past without a question about Mr. Donald Trump. What impact do you expect the Trump tariffs to have on our economy?
Well, we want to avoid tariffs, and we are working on an economic an
But we're not
agreement
going
at the
to, are
moment.
we?
Well, wait a second. I've got a little bit more confidence in our negotiators, and we're working to get a deal with the United States. We're working quickly on that. When our Prime Minister, when Keir Starmer met Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump, the US President, said that he wanted to work on a deal. And that's what we are now doing. I believe in free and open trade. I want to reduce tariffs, not increase
You're
them.
expecting us to escape the fate of Mexico, Canada, most of the EU, and that we'll be the only people he won't slap tariffs on.
Well, let's see what happens. I don't want tariffs. British businesses don't want tariffs. It results in higher prices and less choice for people in the shops. So we are working to try and ensure that we can continue the free and open trade. There are 1 million British people working for American firms. There are 1 million Americans working for British firms. We have balanced trade with the US, no surplus, no deficit. We want to keep it that way.
Chancellor, a pleasure talking to you as always.
Thank you.
Thank you.